When do you start kind of, getting antsy about the draft? Is it, a couple of days before, a week before? Like, when does it really start to, get real for you when it comes to the NFL draft in this time of year?
Yeah, I think the initial shock comes whenever the season's over, right? Like whenever the Cowboys are out of the playoffs, or whenever their season comes to an end, whenever that ends up being. I think that first week is like, okay, where do I start? Where do I begin? But then it's kind of a steady routine of watching this film and kind of learning about these prospects. Now it gets to the point where I think over the last 3 weeks, I think that anxiousness kind of sets in, like you said, because you don't want to miss anybody. You don't want to miss a trend. You don't want to miss a prospect. And you don't want to let, of course, we're going to be on the air for 105.3 The Fan throughout the entire weekend with the draft show. And it's almost an obligation on our side, and it's a responsibility on our side to do the homework, to investigate, to educate, and to kind of put it all out there for everybody on draft weekend to digest. And so I think that's what it is now. I think we're ready, and we have been for probably 3 or 4 weeks now. Now it's trying to connect the dots on these rumors, which ones are true, which ones are false. And then the other thing is just trying to complete a bigger picture. So I think right now it's almost like you've been studying for the final exam. You've been taking the course load, and the course is done, but now you're cramming for the final exam. Like you're getting ready for that last test to go into it. That's kind of what it feels like at the moment. You have the general picture. Now it's time to solidify those details and get ready for next Thursday.
Okay, so Kyle, with all that you have done and all you've looked at, I want to ask you this to get answers on 2 parts. One, from your perspective, if you were in that draft room with your decision, what you would like to see happen, or what you're hearing, and I should say the other part of it, what you're hearing as well with the Cowboys. At 26, do you feel that there is a player there that you'd really like to have, or do you see it more as a group of players that would be there that could possibly also, if they decided to trade back a little bit? Where would you stand on that, and where do you think the Cowboys stand at this moment?
Yeah, I think I'd be open to trading back, because the more that you look at this first round and how things could kind of turn out, the more it looks like some of these top prospects are going to fall, and they're going to kind of sit in your lap by that point. And if there's multiple names there, I think there are teams at the front end of the second round that want to get back up into the fifth-year option of some of these players. A Pittsburgh, a Houston. Think about if Houston, if the smoke is there right now and they don't want to take a quarterback at 2, they might trade out, take a couple extra top 100 picks in order to trade out of that number 2 spot. They still have a selection at 12. They don't pick a quarterback. But then they trade back up with Dallas, and they give you the 33rd pick overall to maybe go get a Hendon Hooker who's sticking around in the late first round, a guy that they feel like it maybe even fits their mold as a sit for a 1 year and then get ready to go next year sort of quarterback situation. Then all you're doing is moving down 7 spots, and you're picking up probably a top 100 pick, maybe multiple picks on the rest of the weekend. And I would be absolutely open to that. Are they open to it? I think so, but is it going to happen? I don't think I can say that, because this is a team that likes to sit in there and pick. You looked at it last year. They were in a similar situation where they had a pick in every single round. 2 years ago, they traded down a little bit. They went from 10 to 12, and that was the Micah Parsons draft. I think that was a special scenario in its own right. But if something is there at 26 and they feel very comfortable picking there, I fully expect them to stand pat, even if there might be other options on the table.
Kyle Youmans of DallasCowboys.com joining us here on the Get Right here on 105.3 The Fan. Just 1 week away from the NFL Draft. Our path to the draft coverage, of course, brought to you by Pluckers, also K-Post Roofing and Waterproofing, and the Owner's Box inside the Omnia Hotel in Dallas. Kyle going to be a part of our draft coverage starting next Thursday at 6 p.m. right here on 105.3 The Fan. Give me the myth of this year's NFL Draft that needs to be busted, Kyle.
The myth? Oh, that one's tough. The myth that needs to be busted. I think the first myth that comes to mind is that it's offense only at 26. Everybody is looking at tight end and offensive line, and certainly if the right guys are there at 26, there will be an offensive player taken. But I think Cowboys Nation needs to kind of take a look at this defense as well. And there's multiple spots along this defense that are premium positions. You're going to have premium prospects available. And even though the defense probably doesn't need as much work as the offensive side of the football does, I think you could see a first-round prospect be selected on the defensive side. And if that's the case, I think, yes, you would have to go very strongly into the offensive side of things very quickly into the second, third, maybe even fourth rounds and just start stacking these offensive picks. But I think the myth right now that's kind of floating out there is that, oh, my gosh, it's pigeonholed into this 26 pick. You have to go offense. I think that's not necessarily the case. Pick the best player available. Pick who you think is going to make the biggest impact right away for this team, and it might actually be somebody that's on the defensive side and somebody that Dan Quinn can really get his hands on and put to work.
So let me follow up with that then. Who is your favorite realistic option on defense at 26 if he is there for the Cowboys in your mind?
Well, I think the buzz name right now is Will McDonald, the edge rusher out of Iowa State. I think that's kind of the number one guy that has been either rumored to the Cowboys, and they've had some interest. Of course, Dan Quinn showing up at Pro Day certainly showed that they definitely have interest. I mean, they have looked at him extensively over these last couple of weeks. But not only Will McDonald, but look at these linebackers too. The Cowboys were very aggressive in bringing in early round linebackers. Drew Sanders from Arkansas, of course, a Denton Ryan product, and Trenton Simpson from Clemson, Dayon Henley from Washington State. They did some homework on linebacker too. And I don't know if I would necessarily put stock in the fact that the linebacker position would be where they went. But let's say they do end up trading down. I think linebackers certainly in play in that regard. Let's say some of the offensive linemen and the tight ends that they have their eyes on early aren't there at 26, but they want to stand pat and draft a guy like Drew Sanders or Trenton Simpson. I think they would do that as well, but it would take the scenario there. The last one I want to mention is corner, because you went out and you made a nice trade to go bring in Stephon Gilmore. You have Trayvon Diggs going into the final year of his contract. But outside of that, even in the future, it's Deron Bland, and that's about it in terms of your cornerback position. So let's say one of these top 3 or 4 guys, like a Joey Porter Jr. for Penn State, falls. I think he would be very heavily into the conversation if he's even around that 26 spot. So there's a couple different avenues, but I think if you're going to look at it, it's definitely going to be that edge spot or those linebackers.
Trenton Simpson, kind of like if you think about the Cowboys at linebacker, really haven't had anybody. They wanted Ja'Marr Cox to be the guy to be a coverage guy possibly there, and that's something that he certainly fits. Now, I can we just assume at this point Bijan Robinson somehow is available at 26? There's no question the Cowboys take him, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think at that point the value's too much for Bijan specifically.
Well, let's say that he's falling and we're now, the Chargers have now passed on, and we're at 22 to 23. In your mind, Kyle Youmans, do you think the Cowboys at that point get on the phone? Do they like him that much?
Ooh, that's a tough one, because in order to move up, so let's take a look at what it would take to get up to 22. So you said the Chargers pass on him at 21. Bijan Robinson's there at 22, and Baltimore is making the selection. Baltimore has J.K. Dobbins. Minnesota has Dalvin Cook. Jacksonville is probably the one spot there. They feel pretty confident in Travis Etienne at the running back spot, and then New York is right after that with Saquon Barkley. I think if he makes it past the 21 mark, where, of course, L.A. has these conversations going on with Austin Eckler at the moment, I don't know if any of those other teams would jump at the value of Bijan in the first round, not necessarily because Bijan's not good enough to overtake those guys that I mentioned that are on each of those rosters, but I also just don't necessarily think they would just have the supplemental pick of a running back in the first round. If he's there in the second round, I'm sure all of those teams would jump at him. But with it being a position they already have filled to a certain extent, I think there's a good spot that he slides. If you wanted to go up, let's say to 22 or even the 21, 21 would take you 100 points on these trade charts that we use so often in order to kind of determine the value of what it would take. But since it's a first-round pick, you're probably going to have to overpay. So you're probably going to take your third-round pick number 90, to go up 6 spots to go and draft Bijan Robinson. I think I'm out on that. I think I would rather take the chance that he would slide from 21 to 26 and then have my third-round pick that I think would have a chance at least to be a starter this year added into the fold as well.
Yeah.
So I think if they're at 26, turn in the card, let's party. But if that's not the case and you have to go finagle your way up into the first round, I really don't see the value in doing that if Bijan is at least the target. Now, if another one of these corners or a wide receiver or somebody like that falls, then maybe you can talk about it because those guys can end up wherever. But with a running back specifically, I think Bijan is either there or he's not by the time the 20 picks go off the board early.
Yeah, I as we were talking through it, I'm like, well, if he gets to 20, it's probably good to stay pat. But if he gets past Pittsburgh, Detroit, Tampa Bay, you're probably going to have to get to 17, 18, or 19 if you want to get him, if he is falling past, Philadelphia.
Yeah, I don't think he gets past 19, to be honest. I think Tampa Bay at 19 would make that pick and never look back. I think they would make that selection pretty quickly. Even Washington at 16, if he makes it to Washington at that spot, even though that's a team that could really use a couple of other high-level players at different positions, I don't think they pass on that value either because they would love to have another big-time running back in the backfield.
Kyle, tell the folks where they can find you and what you got going for the final week up to the NFL draft for us.
Yeah, well, you don't have to go very far, I'll tell you that much, because, of course, next week at this time we'll be on the air for the first round. I mean, the first pick will probably come in at about 9:50, about 10 o'clock p.m., but we'll be on the air starting at 6, 105.3 The Fan and the Dallas Cowboys radio network on Thursday. Can't wait to be a part of the crew again, Sean and everybody, and of course Broadus and Zach Wolchuk throughout the weekend as well, Aisha Morrison. Really excited about that. But until then, you can find me on Twitter, Kyle_Youmans. And then outside of that, on DallasCowboys.com, have a ton of content coming over the next 7 days, including my top 100 that'll be released on Monday. So lots to look forward to, and I can't wait for the weekend, guys.